"Let's cool things off between us for a while," she declared, so I took a permanent break from her while she left panicked messages. The words hit me like a freight train during what I'd imagined would be one of the most important nights of our 3 years together. I'd spent weeks planning this anniversary dinner at Denver's finest steakhouse, the same place where Maya had first told me she could see a future with me, and I'd been carrying an engagement ring in my jacket pocket for the past month, waiting for the perfect moment after dessert. I was a software engineer who believed in careful planning and timing, someone who analyzed every variable before making major decisions, and proposing tonight had felt like the natural culmination of everything we'd built together since we'd met at a tech conference where she was working the marketing booth for a startup. The evening had started perfectly with Maya looking stunning in the black dress I'd bought her for her birthday, laughing at my terrible jokes about the sommelier's pretentious wine descriptions, and talking excitedly about the vacation house we'd been looking at in the mountains outside Boulder. We discussed everything from the kind of coffee maker we'd install in the kitchen to which bedroom would make the best home office, and I'd been mentally calculating mortgage payments while she described the garden she wanted to plant in the backyard. But as the dessert course arrived and I was mentally rehearsing my proposal speech, Maya's entire demeanor shifted like someone had flipped a switch, her smile fading as she stared down at her untouched creme brulee and began fidgeting with her napkin in a way that immediately put me on edge. She told me that our relationship had become too serious too fast, that she felt overwhelmed by the intensity of our connection and needed space to figure out what she really wanted from life before making any major commitments. I listened in stunned silence as she explained that she wasn't ready for the kind of future our relationship seemed to be heading toward, that she needed time to explore who she was as an individual and rediscover her independence before taking the next step with anyone. The engagement ring box felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in my pocket as I processed her words, realizing that everything I thought I knew about our future together was crumbling in real time while other couples around us celebrated their own anniversaries and special occasions. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd chosen this particular restaurant because it represented stability and commitment, the kind of place where serious couples made serious decisions, and here I was being told that seriousness was exactly the problem. Instead of begging her to reconsider or demanding a detailed explanation for this sudden change of heart, I quietly slipped the ring box back into my jacket and signaled the waiter for our check with the kind of calm precision I used when debugging complex code problems. I told Maya that if space was what she needed, then space was exactly what she would get indefinitely, and that I respected her honesty about her feelings even though the timing felt deliberately cruel. The look of shock on her face was unmistakable as she clearly expected me to fight for our relationship, to argue against her decision, or at least negotiate some kind of timeline for when we might reconnect and try again. But I'd learned from watching my parents' messy divorce that you can't convince someone to want you, and I wasn't about to start what I'd hoped would be my engagement story by pleading with someone who'd already mentally checked out of our relationship. I paid the $240 check without complaint, left a generous tip for our waiter who'd been anticipating a celebration, walked Maya to her car in the parking garage, and told her I genuinely hoped she found whatever it was she was looking for in life. I drove home through the empty Denver streets in complete silence while trying to process the fact that my carefully planned future had just evaporated over dessert, and I spent the rest of the night staring at the engagement ring I'd never gotten the chance to present. The following morning, I began systematically erasing our shared life together with the same methodical precision I used to debug complex software problems, treating the dissolution of our relationship like a project that required careful documentation and complete execution. I started by removing Maya from my Netflix account, changing my gym membership back to single status, and blocking her on all social media platforms without any explanation or dramatic farewell post that might invite questions from our mutual friends. I methodically deleted our shared photo albums from my cloud storage, canceled the joint Spotify premium account we'd been splitting, and removed her emergency contact information from my work profile and medical records. The vacation house we'd been touring in the mountains required a phone call to inform the realtor that we were no longer in the market, and I deleted the saved searches from my real estate app along with the mortgage pre-approval documents that had her name listed as co-applicant. I also started declining invitations to our mutual friends' gatherings, politely explaining that I had work commitments or family obligations rather than getting into the messy details of our breakup, which inevitably led to well-meaning friends trying to play mediator or relationship counselor. When Maya texted me 3 days later asking about our planned ski trip to Aspen that we'd booked months in advance, I responded that someone who wants to cool things off shouldn't be planning romantic vacations together, and that she was welcome to use both reservations if she could find someone else to join her. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was forfeiting a $2,000 ski package that I'd been looking forward to for months, but maintaining boundaries seemed more important than recovering sunk costs. My college roommate Jake was completely bewildered when I suddenly stopped showing up to our weekly poker games at his apartment, especially since Maya often joined us for what had become a comfortable couples tradition where she'd bring her famous spinach artichoke dip and help settle disputes about house rules. I explained to Jake that continuing social activities that included Maya would defeat the purpose of the space she'd requested, and that I needed to completely restructure my social calendar to avoid any awkward encounters that might give her mixed signals about my intentions. Jake argued that I was being unnecessarily extreme, that Maya probably just needed a few weeks to work through whatever commitment anxiety she was experiencing, and that cutting off all mutual social connections would only make reconciliation more difficult when she came to her senses. But I'd spent enough time analyzing failed software deployments to know that when a system is fundamentally broken, you don't try to patch it with temporary fixes, you rebuild from scratch with better architecture, and that meant creating a completely Maya-free environment where I could focus on moving forward rather than hoping for her to change her mind. Maya's older brother Ryan began calling my co-workers at the tech company within 2 weeks of our breakup, claiming that Maya was having severe panic attacks and needed my emotional support during what he described as just a rough patch in our otherwise solid relationship. Ryan had always been overprotective of his younger sister, but his interference escalated to the point where he was contacting people I barely knew professionally, spinning elaborate stories about Maya's fragile mental state and my supposed responsibility to help her through this difficult time. Her college sorority sister Emma organized what she called an intervention with my closest friends, insisting that Maya had simply gotten cold feet about commitment and that I was being unnecessarily harsh by cutting off all communication instead of working through her temporary doubts. Emma invited Jake, my gym buddy Marcus, and even my neighbor Tom to a coffee meeting where she presented a detailed case for why I should reconsider my decision, complete with handwritten notes about Maya's positive qualities and testimonials from other friends about our compatibility. My sister received multiple crying phone calls from Maya's mother, who accused me of abandoning her daughter when she was just being vulnerable about her legitimate fears regarding the future, and demanded that I at least provide Maya with some kind of closure or explanation for my sudden disappearance from her life. Maya's mother painted me as a heartless monster who had manipulated her daughter into a false sense of security before cruelly withdrawing my affection the moment she expressed any uncertainty, and she threatened to contact my own parents to discuss my character defects. When my project manager mentioned during our weekly team meeting that someone had called the office asking about my emotional stability and whether I'd been displaying any concerning behaviors at work, I realized that Maya's proxy campaign had escalated to the point where it could potentially threaten my security clearance and professional reputation. I began keeping detailed records of every contact attempt, every phone call, and every piece of misinformation being spread about our relationship, treating the situation like a cybersecurity threat that required comprehensive documentation and strategic countermeasures. The most infuriating aspect of the entire campaign was how Maya's supporters consistently portrayed her as the victim of my unreasonable behavior, completely ignoring the fact that she had been the one to end our relationship and request space, while I had simply honored her wishes with more thoroughness than she had anticipated. Maya started appearing at my favorite coffee shop, my CrossFit gym, and even my weekend volunteer work teaching coding to underprivileged kids at the community center, forcing confrontations that I had deliberately tried to avoid by restructuring my entire routine around places she wouldn't think to look for me. The coffee shop incidents were particularly calculated since she had never shown any interest in that particular location during our relationship, but suddenly she was there every morning when I stopped by for my usual espresso before work, sitting at strategic tables where I couldn't avoid seeing her while pretending to read books she'd never expressed interest in before. At the gym, she enrolled in a membership despite previously complaining that CrossFit was too intense and masculine for her taste, and she would position herself within my line of sight during workouts while wearing outfits that were clearly designed to get my attention rather than facilitate actual exercise. When direct confrontation failed to elicit any response beyond polite nods and continued silence from me, Maya began leaving lengthy handwritten letters under my apartment door, each one more desperate and manipulative than the last, pleading for just 5 minutes to explain herself and promising that everything would make sense if I would only listen to her side of the story. The letters escalated in emotional intensity, ranging from tear-stained confessions about her commitment fears to angry accusations that I was being cruel and vindictive by refusing to acknowledge her attempts at communication, and she started including pressed flowers and photos from our relationship as if physical mementos would somehow break through my resolve. After I continued my complete silence strategy for 2 more weeks, someone slashed all 4 tires on my Tesla and spray-painted the word "heartless" across my windshield in bright red letters, causing $2,400 in damages to my car while it sat in the supposedly secure underground garage of my apartment building. The security cameras captured Maya's distinctive red Honda Civic entering the garage at 11:30 p.m. and leaving 20 minutes later, though she later claimed to police that she was only there to deliver another letter and had witnessed what she described as random vandalism by unknown perpetrators. I filed a comprehensive police report documenting the property damage, provided the security footage, and started parking at my company's lot overnight to avoid any further incidents, while also installing a security camera system in my apartment hallway to document her continued harassment and letter-delivering activities. Maya retained a family law attorney who sent me a cease and desist letter demanding that I stop what they claimed was slandering her character to our social circle and return expensive jewelry that she insisted belonged to her grandmother, even though I'd never possessed any family heirlooms and had only given her gifts that I'd purchased myself. The legal letter accused me of engaging in a coordinated campaign to damage her reputation and emotional well-being, claiming that my refusal to communicate was a form of psychological abuse designed to manipulate and control her, which was rich considering she was the one who had asked for space in the first place. My corporate lawyer easily refuted most of the allegations since they were based on demonstrably false premises, but during the discovery process we uncovered phone records and email communications that revealed Maya had been secretly interviewing for positions in Seattle and San Francisco during our final 6 months together. The subpoenaed documentation showed extensive late-night conversations with her ex-fiancé Brandon, who worked for a tech startup in Silicon Valley, including a 2-hour phone call that occurred during our anniversary dinner while I was in the restroom and dealing with the sommelier about wine pairings. I realized with perfect clarity that Maya's request to cool things off had been a carefully orchestrated stalling tactic while she arranged her escape to California, and she was furious that my immediate withdrawal had destroyed her meticulously planned timeline for transitioning from our relationship to whatever she had planned with Brandon. The legal discovery also revealed that she had already submitted applications to West Coast companies weeks before our anniversary dinner, had been researching San Francisco neighborhoods and apartment rentals, and had even scheduled video interviews for the week following our planned breakup conversation. Her attorney tried to argue that exploring career opportunities was normal and didn't indicate relationship sabotage, but the timing and secrecy painted a clear picture of someone who had been planning her exit strategy while simultaneously pretending to discuss our future together. The most damaging evidence was a series of text messages between Maya and Brandon where she explicitly discussed how to manage the logistics of ending our relationship while maintaining access to the emotional and financial support I provided until she could establish herself in her new city and new life. Through LinkedIn updates and mutual connections, I discovered that Maya had relocated to San Francisco within 6 weeks of our legal settlement and was publicly dating Brandon, with professionally staged photos showing them at tech industry networking events and startup launch parties in trendy Soma venues. Maya's carefully curated Instagram feed had transformed from desperate apologies and vague emotional posts about healing and growth into polished lifestyle content featuring expensive restaurants, weekend trips to Napa Valley, and captions about following your dreams and embracing new opportunities. Her brother Ryan accidentally revealed the extent of her deception in a drunken voicemail he left on my phone 3 months later, admitting that Maya had been video calling Brandon nightly for months before our breakup and that the cooling-off conversation was meant to give her a guilt-free transition period while she secured her new job and living arrangements. The voicemail also disclosed that Maya had expected me to wait around like a backup plan while she explored her options with Brandon, and that the family was shocked by my complete disappearance from her life since they assumed I would eventually come crawling back begging for another chance. When Maya's carefully constructed narrative about pursuing new opportunities and following her authentic path started receiving comments from mutual friends questioning her timeline and asking pointed questions about our relationship, she began posting increasingly vague stories about escaping toxic masculinity and emotional manipulation. Her posts took on an almost frantic quality as she tried to rewrite history and position herself as the victim of my supposed controlling behavior, but the contradictory details and defensive tone only made her look more guilty to anyone who bothered to pay attention. I screenshot everything for my own records but maintained complete radio silence, allowing her contradictory narrative to unravel naturally without any input from me, which seemed to frustrate her even more than direct confrontation would have. The most satisfying part was watching her realize that her attempts to portray me as the villain were falling flat because I wasn't engaging with the drama or providing any ammunition she could use against me in her revisionist storytelling. 8 months later, Maya flew back to Denver for our mutual friend's wedding and ambushed me during the cocktail hour, sobbing that San Francisco had been a complete disaster and Brandon turned out to be a narcissistic workaholic who treated her like arm candy rather than a genuine partner. She cornered me by the bar while I was ordering a drink, her makeup already smudged from crying and her voice shaking as she explained how Brandon had used her for networking purposes and social media content before discarding her when someone younger and more connected came along. Maya begged me to consider rebuilding what we had, claiming she now understood that she had made the biggest mistake of her life and that my stability and genuine care were what she truly needed for happiness and security. I listened politely while she detailed her failed California adventure, how Brandon had turned out to be financially irresponsible despite his flashy lifestyle, and how she'd realized too late that authentic love was more valuable than exciting drama or social media validation. When she asked if I could ever forgive her and give us another chance, I calmly informed her that someone who maintains a backup relationship while planning their exit strategy was never truly committed in the first place, and that her return wasn't motivated by choosing me but by her primary plan failing spectacularly. Maya accused me of being unable to forgive and move past her mistakes, but I pointed out that she had only returned because her carefully orchestrated escape had backfired, not because she genuinely wanted to be with me, and that true commitment meant working through problems together rather than secretly planning alternate futures. I walked away from her tearful protests and rejoined Sarah, the cybersecurity specialist I'd been dating for the past 4 months, who valued my straightforward communication style and appreciated the lesson Maya had taught me about recognizing authentic commitment versus convenient arrangements.